Hi boys and girls, I hope you're all doing really well. Welcome to this week's video. We've got great stuff coming up, but first we're going to start with a real fun song, so make sure you join in with your beautiful singing and your great dance moves. See you shortly.
These words are mine, these words are mine, these words are mine. They're for everyone who hears these words are mine and puts them into practice. They're for everyone who hears these words are mine, these words are mine, these words are mine. They're for everyone who hears these words are mine and puts them into practice. It's like a wise man, it's like a wise man, it's like a wise man, ooh. It's like a wise man who builds his house on the rock, house on the rock, house on the rock, house on the rock. And for everyone who hears these words are mine, these words are mine, these words are mine. They're for everyone who hears these words are mine and puts them into practice. Whoa, whoa. They're for everyone who hears these words are mine, these words are mine, these words are mine. They're for everyone who hears these words are mine and puts them into practice. It's like a wise man, it's like a wise man, it's like a wise man, ooh. It's like a wise man who builds his house on the rock, house on the rock, house on the rock, house on the rock. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house. Yet it did not fall, yet it did not fall, yet it did not fall. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house. Yet it did not fall, yet it did not fall, yet it did not fall. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house. Yet it did not fall, yet it did not fall, yet it did not fall.
Because it had its foundation on the rock. Go!
And for everyone who hears these words are mine, these words are mine, these words are mine. They're for everyone who hears these words are mine and puts them into practice. Whoa, whoa. They're for everyone who hears these words are mine, these words are mine, these words are mine. They're for everyone who hears these words are mine and puts them into practice. It's like a wise man, it's like a wise man, it's like a wise man, ooh. It's like a wise man who builds his house on the rock, house on the rock, house on the rock, house on the rock.
Wow, that was a really great song, wasn't it? I hope you were able to join in with that and that you enjoyed it. Now, that song actually goes with the theme of this week's story. If you watched last week, you will know that we learned a little bit about parables. And if you didn't, very briefly, parables are little stories, short stories that Jesus told to the people when he was here on earth to teach them about what was right and what was wrong and how we can live a life pleasing to God. Now, this parable this week is called The Wise and the Foolish Builders. Now, there were two builders, and you'll see in the story, I'm not going to give too much away, who built two houses on very different grounds. And one of them is really wise, one of them is quite foolish. So watch this video and I'll talk to you about it in a short while.
Welcome. Today I'm going to tell you a very old story. It's from the Bible. Everyone then who hears these words of mine and does them will be like the wise man who built his home on the rock. And everyone who hears these words of mine and does not listen will be like the foolish man who built his house on the sand. This is how our story begins. One day in Lego City, 2 new builders arrived from out of town. They were both anxious to build a house. This is Todd. He's a wise, careful builder. And this is Joe. He is the exact opposite.
So when you build your house? Probably tomorrow, when I get the right supply.
I bet I can beat you. But you haven't even picked out a place to build your house. Mine is going to be right there on solid rock. Right there. Sand is way cooler than rock. I don't think that's quite a good... goodbye? The next day, Todd and Joe met up at the rocks and sand and started to build their new homes. One more block and... done. Haha, beat you. But just because Joe built faster than Todd didn't mean that his house would be better. Todd kept on building, for he knew that a good foundation and taking our time is important for building a home.
Can you go any faster?
I'm taking my time. Wow, it's a good thing my house is finished.
Well, folks, you better hope your houses are standing strong tonight. We have a huge storm coming this way.
Oh no, I hope Joe knows about this.
Tonight on Where Are My Pants?
Honey, where are my pants?
Todd was right. A huge storm came with black clouds and pouring rain. Would their houses last? And the rain fell, and the flood came, and the winds blew and beat on Todd's house. But it did not fall, because it had been founded on the rock. But the flood also came to Joe's house, and the winds blew and beat against Joe's house, and it fell. No, not my awesome house. Oh no, Joe, my house. Joe, I tried to warn you. You can build a new house on the rock.
I guess you're right, this time.
This story teaches us that when we do what is right in God's eyes, we do well and we succeed and God can protect us. So it's really important to know what is right. And how do we know what is right? We can't just guess. What we have to do is turn to the Bible. We need to read different verses from the Bible. And today, the song that you've sung today at the start of this video is actually a verse from the Bible. It's a verse from this story, from this parable, that when we do what is right, we're like the wise man who built his house on the rock, on a solid foundation. Now, another thing that this story teaches us is that Jesus is our solid foundation. When we build our lives on Jesus, what does that mean? That means that when we do things that we know Jesus wants us to do, when we follow the Bible and we read the Bible and get to know Jesus more through those stories in the Bible, when we watch these videos every week, and again we learn more and more about God, we learn more and more about Jesus, and we do those things that are right in his eyes, we learn to live a life that is pleasing to him. We learn to base our lives around God, and that means that God becomes our foundation. He's the one that holds our lives together. He's the one who's created us. He's the one who created our whole life and has these plans for us. And actually, when we do what the Bible tells us to do, what God tells us to do, we are making him the foundation, the thing that holds our lives together. Just like the wise man in the story used rock and really strong, solid ground to build his house. When the storms came, he was safe. His house didn't get knocked over. And it's the same thing with our lives. When we have God at the centre of our lives, when we make sure that God is the most important thing in our lives, and we make sure that we do what is right in his eyes, then when things happen to us, because bad things happen to everybody in this world unfortunately, but when things that are bad that happen to us, because God is at the centre, we can rely on him to help us get through those bad situations. He can protect us, he can save us, he can be with us, he can provide for us, and he can keep us safe as long as we've made sure that we live a life that's pleasing to him, and we live a life where God is at the centre of our lives. He's the most important thing above everything else. Jesus is at the centre. So make sure that you remember that, because it's really, really important. Now your activity this week is to get a piece of paper, just an A4 piece of paper, and fold it in half. When you folded it in half, you'll end up with 2 columns, okay? Those of you who are a bit older, you might want to draw your own table with 2 columns on. And on the one side of your piece of paper, or your one column, I want you to list things that you think are really wise, good choices. What are some good choices that you're going to make this week now, in these next few days that are coming ahead? And then on the other side of the piece of paper, or on the other column of your table, I want you to list things that are not so wise, foolish things, bad choices. So think about what you do on a day-to-day basis. And one example I'm going to give you now is that perhaps a good choice would be to make your bed when your mum or your dad asks you to. A bad choice would be to not eat your vegetables at dinner time that your mum or your dad have cooked for you. Okay, so list lots of different things, and as always, let me see a copy of them, take a picture of them, because I love to see your hard work that you've put in it. When you've got your list, I want you to do something really special. I want you to hold that piece of paper in your hands. With the one side, you've got the things that are good choices just at home, or good choices in your life. And the other side, you've listed things that are not good choices. That's something that a foolish man would do. And I want you to hold that piece of paper in front, like this, in front of you, and ask God to be there with you. Invite him to be next to you, nothing spooky. You just say, Jesus, just be here with me right now. I need to speak to you. And I promise you, he will come and he'll be there. You won't see him with your eyes, but you might feel his presence. Not in a spooky way, in a really special, beautiful way. You'll just have a sense of peace within you that you're not alone, that Jesus is listening. And what I want you to do is say all those things, read them out, those things that you've listed that are good choices, and say to Jesus, please help me to always choose the right choices from this list. Help me to make good choices. Help me to be wise like the man in the story that built his house on a rock. And then look at your other list, the list of things that aren't good, the list of things that are foolish. And again say, Jesus, please help me to not choose these as my choices in life. Help me to keep away from these bad choices and to keep myself wise and full of you and full of knowledge of what you want me to do. And then you just simply say amen. And Jesus will hear your prayer, and he will help you in your life to make good choices and to remain wise. And another way that you can be really, really wise, do you know it's really easy, is to just read verses from the Bible. So have a look at different stories in the Bible, listen to these stories every week, and listen to the things that I teach you, that these stories teach us, and do them, put them into action. Like the song said, put them into practice. That means live them out. So if the Bible says, love your neighbours, love those people around you, live it out. Go and love on your neighbours. Show them you care. Okay? If the Bible says, which it does, respect your mum and dad, live it out. Make sure that you always respect your parents. Okay? So really easy, but very, very important. I do hope that you've enjoyed this video again this week, and that you really take something from it. Send your activities in to me, either via the Outburst WhatsApp group or on our Facebook page, the Father's Home Church Facebook page. And keep safe again. And lockdown, I think, is going to be over soon. So hopefully it won't be too long till we see each other again. Have a great week, and I'll see you next week. Bye.